All right, so I just want to come in and peel off. Now be careful when you're unmasking. You don't want to peel off any of the orange tape that's underneath. That stays. All right, so there's our first one. We're going to move on to the next corner. Let's do this one right here. Same process. Keeping on the orange tape. I'm a little hesitant about having tape stick to that fresh paint, so I just folded it under so there's no sticky tape sticking to that pattern we just did. Fold this under. Get everything secured. This paper. All right, same deal. All right, so same thing. Clean paper towel. So clean paper towel. Give it a little wipe, and at the same time while you're wiping it, check your masking again. It's a good time right before you spray, just to make sure everything's where it's supposed to be. Hasn't moved. All right, so let's do the next one. Let's do fish scales. All right, so so like I was saying before, you want to make sure that it fits side to side. This one barely makes it, we'll be fine. Well, it would have been nice to have it a little bit wider. We're going to be a little short. That's okay. So what I want to do, same thing. Gun is set up the same. Gun is set up the same. Let me just throw a little bit of paper up here so I can do a little sample, see how it comes out. Now with the fish scales, again, practice before you do it. You want to make sure it's sitting right up against the paint, so you got to kind of flex it a little bit. And you're aiming for the edge. Most of the paint will be on the stencil, just a little bit is going to go on your panel. All right. And you might need to go over it a couple times. Okay, now if you know your stencil is too short, you don't want to go all the way to the end, because when you come in and want to do a little bit more, you're going to have a line going up there, right? So you want to make sure that you can continue on. If you need to add a couple extra, and have it look continuous and not like it's the end of the panel. Okay, so once you're happy with that, and to show you the next part is once you get one row down, you lift it up and you shift it over halfway so that the points of what you just sprayed are in the middle of the round parts that you're about to spray, right? So do that, you line it up, keep it held, you don't want to move it. Okay, and you just keep going, shifting back and forth as you move along. Okay, so let's give this a try. Let's try it down here. Now one thing to keep in mind is all these edges are going to be blacked out, so any mess ups or if it came up short a little bit right on the edge, not a huge deal, because we're going to fog in the edge once it's all done to give it a little bit of depth. So I'm just going to bring it down here, push it down so it's flat up against the panel, and try not to move. I know it's a little difficult. And you want to spray straight up and down. You don't want to spray at an angle, otherwise the paint is going to want to go underneath the stencil. Underneath the stencil. Okay, so there's our first row. Now what I want to do is I want to shift it, and keep in mind, you see we're going to be short on this one side, so I want to be careful with that. Again, I'm pushing down a little bit. Okay, and I stop short so that I can pick it up and shift it over just a little bit and finish off these last two. Okay, and then just keep going back and forth. All right, so this one we can do regular. Line it up. Go right along that edge. Shift it and just keep on going. Very low pressure, and I'm barely touching the trigger. Barely touching the trigger. And remember, this is all hand done. This is not done by computers or stickers. You're doing this by hand. So there is going to be some variations, right? It might shift a little bit, but that's okay. I mean, you're learning. Custom paint by hand, there's always going to be some little differences. That's all right. Makes it a one of a kind. There is no others like it in the world. And as we get close, it gets a little bit narrower here, it goes a little bit quicker. But still, you got to do the exact same thing you've been doing. Keep it all very consistent. So you can see after using this stencil, just even for one corner, it gets really saturated with paint. So they become difficult to use over and over again. They start curling up and get really thick with paint. So that's why I need to show you how to make your own. That way you don't have to use a crusty one. It's best to start with one that you made and you know what it's going to be like. And the temptation for this design is to just go straight across. Go straight across, but you end up losing a lot of the light details. It all becomes very dark. So you want to be careful of that. That's why I try to follow the edge of the paper, edge of the stencil, as much as possible, just so that you don't end up with it being too dark. One of the points of this exercise is obviously gun control, but also to add a little bit of contrast so not everything's too dark, not everything's too light, right? You want some dark, some light, because once we shoot some candy over this, you want to give it a nice depth with lights and darks, not everything dark, not everything light. Really adds to the panel. Almost there. There we go. And I don't want to stop short just in case the edge doesn't get covered by black, so I want to run it all the way off the panel. So there's our fish scales. Looks pretty cool so far. But you can see how it gives it some shadow with the depth, so it looks like they're layered. That's what we're going for. All right, we'll let that sit a minute. All right, so let's start unmasking this one. And always make sure the paint is dry before masking or unmasking. I know the temptation is just to keep doing more and more, but you got to make sure that the paint dries completely in between, otherwise you're going to have problems. Okay, so be patient, and you'll get there.